Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. We are on episode 136, and we are coming at you on a Saturday evening, which is a little bit later than we typically record. But as a promise to all our listeners and more or less to ourselves, we have fitted in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we actually planned to, which actually this is a good theme that I wanted to bring up anyway. And it just so happened to be very coincidental that it happened on both our ends this week. You used the phrase check it at the door, right?
That's right.
So we wanted to do this a little bit
Gotta
earlier.
let it go.
What's that?
You gotta let it go.
Yep. So you and I both had instances this week where the both of us had slept in longer than expected, which caused a little bit of a delay and a little bit of readjustment, I guess would be a nice way to put it, for our schedules. And when I slept in, it kind of messed up my schedule and was late to the gym and all this stuff, and slept right through my alarm, which never happens. And even when it does happen, I always wake up relatively soon thereafter. But I had completely zonked out and overslept by, 2 hours worth.
Yeah.
And when it would have very easily ruined my day. And when I got to the gym, I was flustered and I had to start with a client right away. And luckily, the client that I had prior to that had canceled in the middle of the night and sent me a text. So that was, almost like divine intervention there, that I didn't miss him. But regardless, I told you guys when we got to the gym, I said that this was going to kind of have me frazzled for the entire day. And one of the things you told me, you said, check it at the door. You said that happens frequently with some of your employees. And you want to go into detail about the check it at the door thing and what that means and how you can apply it, because it really resonated with me a little bit.
Yeah. So it's ironic that it's something that came up this month because our topic for the month, that we kind of pick a topic every month at work that we're going to focus on at a safety meeting. And the topic this month was complacency. Well, one of the talking points is being late or forgetting a part or forgetting something you need and putting yourself behind schedule. So I've always said that, whatever happened before yesterday, last week, you can't focus on the bad. You got to focus forward. So check it at the door. It's just let it go. You can't change it. All you can do is get better from it. So that's kind of the whole idea of checking it at the door. It's you just let it go. Literally just just like Frozen, let it go.
100%. And it's very easy to say that, but it's also a lot more difficult to actually follow through with it and get it out of your mind.
Oh, it's the hardest thing in the world. I'm convinced of it. If you're dedicated and passionate about something and it's your fault, it's 100% your problem, letting it go is one of the hardest things to do.
Yes. Yep. Especially because, and I just think that comes with a little almost professionalism to a degree. I know that you and I are largely similar in that regard, where you almost feel like with anything you do, you hold yourself to a standard of it. So I kind of try to take that mentality to everything. If I'm in the gym working and as a trainer and working with my athletes, I try to be the best that I can be and, build my athletes up mentally, well, foremost physically, but mentally, spiritually, emotionally, all that stuff. And likewise, when I'm teaching, I try to be the best teacher I can be. And there's a certain degree of professionalism that goes into your craft that you always try to uphold. And whenever I'm late for something or whatever it is, anytime I feel like the certain standard that I have for myself isn't being adhered to, it wears on me. And I'll think about it for the entire day, and I won't be able to get lose focus because of it. Or I won't be able to stay focused because of it,
Right. I agree. I used to do that. I mean, I still do it, but I try my best not to anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But it is hard. It's hard to not focus on what you did bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's part of what makes successful people successful to a degree is, I don't want to say focusing on the negative, of course, but one of the things that the conversations that I've had pretty frequently with people in terms of bodybuilding is how every show I've ever won, I've always been last place backstage, is what I tell people. So when you go back and you're backstage, especially it was bad earlier in my career, my competitive career, but as I've gotten older, I've had a lot more confidence with it going into the show. But when I'm backstage, you look at everybody else's strong points and you focus on your weak points and your flaws. So like I'm backstage looking at all of people's best body parts, and then I'm looking at my body parts that aren't as strong. So like hence when I say I came in last place backstage is because I put myself in last behind all these guys and don't really create a realistic picture of it. Now, not that you're talking in the comparison sense, but we're always our harshest critic, or I think at least we should be if we're trying to be better at something. It's always important to make sure that you face the man in the mirror first and address him and be critical of him first and foremost.
Absolutely. Yeah, because if you can't beat yourself, if you can't beat the guy in the mirror when you're in a competition with yourself, then you're never gonna. Even if it's a competition that you're doing, you're never gonna beat anybody else because you got to beat yourself first.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think
Because that's your. Go ahead.
No, I think that that's probably a learned skill because it seems like, to be fair, dude, it seems like when we talk to all these people and we have these interviews over the course of the past like 2+ years, it just seems like an overwhelming majority of what we've learned so far from people are like skills that you and I need to develop, or skills that people trying to be successful need to develop further. And I don't think there's ever a finish line, like most things in life or most things that we talk about. There's no finish line of I have developed this skill to the point where it doesn't need developed anymore. It's like I don't know, like you can create any sports analogy you want, like shooting a basketball or like hitting a baseball. Like the greatest hitters to ever lived, failed 6 out of the 10 times they were at the plate. Sometimes more. So like you never get to the point where you are completely okay or completely satisfied with the skill development. And I just feel like it seems to me that the people that are more successful are just further along in terms of those specific skill developments than the people that are below them or beneath them, or however you want to phrase it.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying.
But for us, it's just a matter of like, what are those skills? That's what we're constantly trying to bring out every time in every episode.
I feel like that's the hardest battle too, is like, like when, like for me, especially, like, I know there's things that I want to be good at, and a skill, so to speak, that I want to master, but I need to learn what that skill is. Mm-hmm. Like, I know that they're there. I just don't know what all of them are, so I can even attempt to try to master them. So,
well, I think that work ethic can only, gosh, I can't believe I'm saying this, so I got to provide context. I think that work ethic can only get you so far with things. So It's not as simple as like, hey, I'm just going to get better at this and work really hard and I'll be successful, because there's a lot of, how do I want to phrase it? There's a lot of like logistics and planning and mapping and preparation that goes into being successful. It's not just about working hard. You need the correct direction of the things that you're working at.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, you gotta,
go ahead.
That's right. That kind of goes back to what we've talked about several times is that roadmap to success.
Yeah, 100%.
You have to make sure you're creating the right roadmap. And that's why I think our maps change, like our, hypothetical air quote here, the roadmap changes so often is because we're still learning what that roadmap, what the destination is for the map. Sure. Obviously we know, like you said, there's no end, but there has to be a direction of travel. So we're still trying to figure out where the area on the map we're trying to get to. So that's why it keeps changing.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of all that about self-improvement and hard work and trying to figure out skills that you're trying to develop, how was training this week?
Very good. How about yourself? I started training in the morning again at home, which is tough. Because of, how I am, I should say, is being loud and obnoxious. So I can't do that when people are sleeping, 15 feet from where I'm working out, but it seems to have been a good week. I did cardio 5 days, so got 5 miles in. That's
That's
good.
awesome. 5 more
And I
miles than
did,
I got in, so I got to commend you on that.
and I got the core movements, push, pull, and legs all accomplished. So it was good. It was a good week.
Yep, no doubt. I'm kind of in the same boat. I had a good week as well. Kind of like one of those weird things. And anybody who's been training, specifically strength training for a period of time, knows what I'm going through. I had this weird week where, and this is a good thing. I had this strange week where everything just seemed to be clicking, and all my weights went way up with no obvious change. So like nutrition, supplementation, training was all largely similar. Like it's not like I did anything different, but for some reason I went up in all my movements pretty substantially. Like,
You
I
think?
mean, we were doing trying to think of some examples. Like just the other day we had a press day and I ended up incline benching my top weight I had for 5 reps previously. And then I did the same working weight a couple of days later and I got 3, or excuse me, 3 more. So I got 8. So like the
Nice.
top, and like I was barely getting the 5th one, and then took the same weight a couple of days later and got it for 8. And then same thing on dumbbell press. Um, we did a burnout set of hundreds at the end. Well, we kind of like worked up and weight progressively. And when we did like a top set of just, it was kind of one working set and a back off set. So we used the 100-pound dumbbells and then we dropped to like the 90s, I think. So we did 2, I don't want to say a burnout set, but it was 2 like AMRAP sets, just as many reps as possible.
Yeah,
So on the hundreds, I ended up getting like 9 more reps than I had previously got the last time we did that, which like
that's fantastic.
1 or 2, 3 reps, like that's a product of, oh, I was a little bit more hydrated, or I got a little bit more sleep, or my meals were a little bit more on point or something like that. But to like pull numbers like 9 extra reps out of thin air like that was pretty crazy. So I'm
Yeah,
trying to go back,
that's
like I try to connect the dots, and be like, what the heck did I do that accounted for such a big jump? But I honestly, man, I can't really think of anything that did that.
does that. So when that's happened to me in the past, because it's happened a few times where, and you probably remember, where I had a great week and we were moving towards like some real benchmark numbers, and then I would tail off for a couple of weeks where the numbers would actually go down. And I try to like dissect that and figure out why. What is the why? Like, am I leaving it? Am I not in control of the like that effort level? Or like, how, what I mean? I know you know what I mean, but like, so it's perceived effort, right? When you go to failure, it's how much effort are you actually putting out?
Yes.
And I wonder if when we have those really good weeks, does that, well, for you, okay, that's a question, I guess, really. Does that trigger in your mind to think about, okay, so am I not leaving it all hang out every other week because I did so much better this week, but nothing else changed, like that should have made it change?
Yeah, I guess that's, I don't know if this is what you're alluding to, but it kind of instills a little bit of a different thought pattern. Like, because I'm always searching for, when something like that happens, well, what did I do differently that was correct?
Right.
And maybe you need to backtrack and say, maybe you didn't do anything correct this week. Maybe this week should be the standard. What did you do wrong the other weeks?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. I was having a real hard time getting
Yeah,
that out.
no, I get what you're saying. I don't know, man. There's got to be something to it for sure. I think it's probably more advantageous for me to do it that way instead of saying, hey, what did I do right this week that was above average or above the norm? It's like, well, maybe staying consistent is the norm and maybe you deviated from that the week prior.
Right. And that's kind of what I always chalked it up to because, try to look at it from a realistic standpoint. I'm not going to make a huge jump week to week. That
Sure.
doesn't make sense, especially if everything's consistent and nothing changed. So maybe maybe mindset was better this week compared to last week.
Well, and I
So the
think it's
mindset,
important to note when you talk about mindset and mental game is that your body's interpretation of stress is largely similar across all different types of like paradigms. So when
right,
you have mental stress, you have physical stress of like exercise, extreme exercise, or the stress of sleep deprivation, the stress of you're nervous because you have a job interview coming up or whatever. That stress manifests itself physically and mentally. There's kind of like that synergy between those two where it affects your body holistically the same way. So I think that if
uh,
you deviate too far away from your mental game, that can manifest ultimately in lack of physical progress too.
huh? That
So I
makes
think that
sense.
it's just important to kind of think about that. Like, okay, maybe, yeah, this week you ate all your meals, you took all your supplements, you got 8 hours of sleep, you did your deep tissue massage work, you went to your chiropractor, you got cryotherapy done, you checked all the boxes of the physical stuff, but where were you at mentally?
Right.
I had this catastrophic event with my family, and then I had an issue at work, or I had a job interview coming up that I was nervous about, and it kind of wrecked me for a couple days. Like all those things play a role here.
Yeah. So I guess the physical and the mental, the psychological, I guess, go hand in hand.
Yes, 100%. There, you can't have one without the other. It's impossible. You can't
Right. Right.
optimize physical progression without trying to optimize your mental game or whatever. There's no way around it. I've been down that road too many times, and I can tell everybody like it's undisputable that like I make the most progress physically in the gym in terms of like strength training or physique improvement or whatever when I'm in the best mental state. Because if
Which
I'm
makes
not in
sense
a
because
good
it makes
mental
your
state,
body's probably go
what's
ahead.
that?
I was gonna say I feel like that makes sense because it's almost like your body's like primed and prepped to accept what you're doing.
Absolutely. 100%. It's like one of the
So
things that I think is underrated in terms of like physique improvement and strength progression is when people don't take their health into an account. So like the healthier your body is and the better micronutrient profile it has. And, I tend to take health supplements over performance supplements because if your body's running more efficiently, it's going to do the things you want it to do better.
right, absolutely. So I think it's like, to go back to several conversations we've had where we tried to give unsolicited advice about weight loss or getting started in a gym setting or doing this or doing that, anything is you got to be in the right mental place first.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think we've talked about that a few different times, but I don't personally hammer on it enough that this is 90% mental.
Yeah.
Because once you got that licked, it's just a matter of doing the thing, going to the gym, eating the right meals, getting the right amount of sleep, and treating your body right. But once you treat it right mentally, you got the game pretty well in the bag.
Yes, for sure. And I think when you
Hmm.
talk about that mental game, I, that kind of like it's a nice little segue into a commercial break because I can go on kind of a little bit of a monologue afterwards about a conversation that it just so happens that I coincidentally enough had this conversation probably about 3 or 4 times this week. So it kind of fits in that same vein of where you're at mentally in terms of like physical preparation for something. So tell you what, let's go to a quick commercial break and we'll talk more about that conversation when we come back. As listeners of the Chasing Dreams podcast, we know that you demand the highest quality at all times. If you're interested in quality, look no further than Beast Mode Baking. Beast Mode Baking aims to bring the highest quality, creative, and of course delicious baked goods to your home with nationwide shipping. All orders need to be pre-ordered to ensure they're packed fresh and shipped out to you as soon as possible. Beast Mode Baking offers a flat rate of $15 for shipping due to the size and weight of the cookies and doughs. So if you're interested in Beast Mode Baking, please contact CEO Shannon Knorr. That's at SKNORR13 on Instagram and order your delicious baked goods today because every time you support them, you're supporting the podcast as well. And we are back from our commercial break. All right, man, prior to the break, we were having a discussion about how kind of worked its way into us talking about how mental stress and physical stress are interpreted by the body the same, and there needs to be synergy and some balance between uh, like bodies, mind, and spirit in order for us to kind of progress the way we want to. Well, we always get, this is something that I wanted to talk about. We always get a lot of like it's stressed to us, no pun intended. It's stressed to us the importance of biofeedback. So the term biofeedback used just to refer to what your body's telling you. What feedback is your body giving you biologically or physiologically? Like, are you tired? Or is your strength going up? Are you able to fall asleep at night? How does your digestion feel? Like those like kind of physical markers. We're kind of inundated with people telling us the importance of like looking at those physical stressors and having that kind of dictate what we do in the gym. So Ben Pekulski, a former professional bodybuilder, since retired and has a bunch of other business endeavors, talks about it. He talked about it with me before about assess your present settings. Like, what is your present setting? Like when you go into the gym, how are you physically feeling presently? How much water did you drink prior to that training session? How much sleep did you get the night before? What did your nutrition look like earlier that day? So we're constantly bombarded with knowing the importance or understanding the importance of that from a physical perspective, which we know that. But I think it's also go ahead.
I gotta ask a question. So when he asks that, when he says that assess your current settings, if they're off, do you make changes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's where like some programs are flawed. There's a lot of great benefits to following like exercise programs, but there's also some downside, like especially if you're doing, let's say I'm doing a powerlifting program where everything is percentage based. So I have to do these certain percentages. Well, I may come into the gym one day dehydrated, sleep deprived, and didn't get all my meals in. And now I got to go to these high percentages that my body's not ready to go. So with him, it's a matter of I can deviate away from plan or honestly even deviate off plan and not even go to the gym that day. If you don't feel like recovery is going to be optimal, it's going to be just digging your recovery hole a little bit deeper and putting you further and further behind. It might be necessary to not even lift. So yeah, he does deviate.
Okay.
And I do the same. But now it's gotten to the point too where something that we have to consider is mental state. Where am I mentally, like when I go into a training session? Or where am I mentally? Do I need like a deload week? Like I remember one time with Austin, he and I, this was a while ago, my coach Austin, I actually did a food break for about a week. Now, it wasn't in a contest prep, it was in the off season where I was forcing down so much food and feeling like complete crap. And it was so difficult for me to continue to eat this stuff, not just from a physical standpoint, like a digestive standpoint, but also like a mental standpoint. Like it was so hard just to eat the same repetitive foods in such mass quantities day after day after day. So we went on like a week break because it was like refreshing me mentally. Tell you what, after 3 days though, alone, I was ready to get back on because I felt like was so deviated off of the norm that I had to get back to it. So I think that the mental side is something that we have obviously throughout this episode established is important, but how do you go about assessing where you're at mentally? Because sometimes it's difficult for people to connect the dots of seeing how a little bit of a issue they had at work, how that can affect their squat session later on in the evening. So how do you go about assessing that? Because I think that's a question that's a lot of people are wondering. And I myself am kind of like mentally puzzling over and kind of going through and problem solving in my head as I'm asking it.
I think the only way to even make the attempt to assess it is if you're 100% honest with yourself.
Yes.
Because I found that for me personally in the past, I'm not always 100% honest with myself. I am my own worst critic, enemy, opponent, all of that, because I'm not honest with what I'm doing with myself. Not that I lie to everybody else, but when I'm doing that, so to speak, after action report of the week or the month, I don't always tell myself, well, you left a lot on the table.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be completely honest with yourself, I think, before you can even attempt to make a big change or make a big thought process change.
Well, and I've talked about this ad nauseum at this point, both in person with people and certainly on the podcast, about how the more intelligent, I don't want to say more intelligent because intellect isn't necessarily correlated with like knowledge, if that makes sense. So just because you know a lot and you've learned a lot and studied a lot doesn't make you a high intellect person. Because I
Right.
think a high degree of intellect is like critical thinking and processing and being able to see multiple sides to different arguments, all this stuff. Like, for example, you could have someone that goes to medical school and learns about the human body. Now, obviously, I'm not being dismissive of that. If you pass medical school and become a doctor, you're obviously very smart. But like, you could have people that have a higher degree of like problem solving and critical thinking skills. They just don't have the knowledge of the human body because they never learned it.
Right.
But anyway, I feel like when you get to a higher degree of knowledge, we'll say, not just intellect, but also of knowledge about the human body and about yourself, I feel like you can lie to yourself more easily because you can create justifications and rationalizations in your head for anything. Like the example that I've used is the one reason why I don't have a, or why I have a coach when I do my contests, when I compete in bodybuilding, is because I'm so, not, I don't want to say irrational, but like radical with things, that I can convince myself of anything. I can convince myself I need to do 2 more extra hours of cardio every day because I'm behind. And then a day later, I can convince myself that I need to go binge on double cheeseburgers from McDonald's because I'm flat and I'm too depleted and I need to fill back out and carb load. So like, I feel like the more you know, then the more, gosh, I don't want to call it an excuse because you really think you're justifying these things to yourself in an appropriate manner. But the more you know, I feel like the more you can talk yourself into something or out of something that you should or shouldn't be doing. So that's
I
kind of
agree.
like lying to yourself too. But I mean, it's hard because it's not really like you don't even know you're lying, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the problem is that's the hardest part. And I think that's what I was trying to get to mainly more was being able to realize when you're telling yourself a line of crap.
Yes, 100%.
You know, like whenever you're, a lot of times people can tell when you're trying to sell them a line of crap, but it's hard for you to be able to pick up that you're doing it to yourself.
Hmm. I think
Um,
I think the best thing to do though in that instance, in terms of like interpreting that and seeing that it's actually happening from your end, is look for like repetitive behaviors. So
yes.
if I'm on a contest diet, right, and I'm in charge of my own nutrition and dieting, and I find myself going to the same well repetitively, that's probably an issue. Like if every week or twice a week, I keep finding myself implementing a cheat meal because I'm quote behind, and that happens every single, or I'm not, excuse me, I'm not behind or I'm like ahead and I'm a little bit flat. That's probably an issue if I do that every single week.
Right.
It's like, no, you're just trying to get that cheat meal because you want it. So I feel like if you have a behavior like, okay, one would be skipping the gym. You'd say, oh, I need a rest day because my body's beat up and I need to recover because I'm not focusing on my recovery enough. And I think taking my foot off the gas a little bit would be beneficial. Sure, that's awesome. And there's certainly a multitude of contexts where that would be appropriate. And I run into them with myself often, with my clients often. However, if you're doing that multiple times a week, you're probably not anywhere near overtraining, and you're certainly not anywhere near the need to take a break. So if you find yourself skipping the gym more than you're going to gym because of quote recovery purposes, that's a repeat offense. And once you see that repetitive behavior, it's probably unnecessary. So I think that looking for a trend would probably be the best advice that I could give in regards to that, honestly.
I I would have to second that. You just do that, after action report with yourself every week or every day if you need to, or, and just all dial it down as tight as you have to watch for those leading indicators that are going to start saying, hey, this is becoming a trend. This is becoming a problem.
Could you repeat
And
what you said? You said an after action report? Because I'd never heard
yeah,
that phrase until you started saying it.
yeah. So it's a military thing. After action report. Anytime that in the service they go on a mission, they debrief and do an after action report. It's just a debrief of what you just did. So I like to do it at the end of every week. I think about my workouts, think about my diet, and where can I improve? What did I do wrong? What did I do right? And be honest with it and try to use it for fuel.
Yes. Yes. I like that. I mean, we've talked about different strategies in the past for self assessment, like trying to think of some of the ones we've talked about, like the setting the alarm,
Right.
setting your phone alarm for frequent intervals throughout the day just to kind of assess where you're at and what you're doing. Super.
That's essentially so when you started talking about your alarms where you did it every day, every hour, essentially that's why I liked it so much, is because I was like, man, that's basically a hyper speed after action report. That's looking at the last 60 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, did I squander time in the last 60 minutes? Did I not get it accomplished? And if you can break your day down to 60 minutes at a time, with a good work ethic and good willpower, you can be really dangerous.
Now, I know that weighing in on the scale too often can be a problem for people, mentally speaking.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's important to do it frequently enough to be able to assess and alter course if necessary. So, like, I know that the scale is like bastardized by a lot of people because it can be misleading. But I find people sometimes get too far away from that and they're like, oh, why don't I only weigh myself once every 2 months? It's like, well, if you weigh in at 300 pounds and then 2 months later you weigh in at 300 pounds, you just wasted 2 entire months worth of work where you thought you were getting benefit. You weren't.
That's 60 days, just so everybody knows that.
Yeah.
And I've done it.
So I feel like doing more frequent check-ins or after action reports or, assessing your present levels or however you want to word it of all these things that we've said, I think the higher degree of frequency at which you do those things, probably the higher degree of success you're going to get as a result.
I agree.
I'm
There's not
anybody where I go into these lulls where I don't assess myself frequently enough. I don't track my progress in every or as and I guess not in every metric, but I don't track my progress in enough metrics. And then you go through a lengthy period of time where progress isn't made, and then you're kicking yourself because you wasted, X amount of hours, X amount of days, X amount of weeks, X amount of years, whatever.
Yeah, and the problem with it is, and this is a frequent problem for especially like somebody who feels like they're behind the eight ball, middle-aged man who's in his mid-30s, 300 pounds, works a full-time job. When you find that you did that, it's really hard, especially if you have any kind of, not that you're weak, but mental weakness as far as your accountability for yourself. Because once you realize that you've lost 2 months, it's like, man, what am I doing? And it's hard to trigger that to start back up.
Mm-hmm. And I think that could kind of be like almost like a wrap up point for us where this is certainly, because I know that I'm going to do this, certainly actionable step time where what can listeners take away from your and I's rambling today? And something that I'm certainly going to take away is maybe I need to do more frequent self assessment, whether that's going in or coming out of something. So going into a training session, where am I at mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever? Coming out of a training session, how did that go? Do I need to program things differently? Did I work hard enough? All that stuff. And we use these gym analogies on a weekly basis with our show, but really you can transcend just the gym and go into every area of life. Constantly be a
Absolutely.
self-assessing individual. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. What did you call it? The after action report?
Yes.
Do a before action report and an after action report with, most tasks in your life, and you'll probably find that you're better off because of it.
I'd have to agree. I guess the actionable step I'm going to take this week is I'm going back to the notebook.
There you go.
Because it's on paper.
Yep.
Black and white.
Absolutely. I am going to have to come up with something now. When can I self-assess? I'm going to do the alarm thing. I'm going to set my
Okay.
alarm, lower degree of frequency than I used to. I'm going to set my alarm for every 3 hours from the time I wake up. And so that way, when my alarm goes off, I will assess what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and if what I'm doing and how I'm doing it at that time is conducive to where I want to be. So
I like it.
That will be my action step for the week.
I like it.
All right. So with that, we have come to the end of another episode of the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. This is episode 136. As always, we appreciate your listenership, and we look forward to hearing back from you guys next week.
Unbreakable, unstoppable, I'm pushed to the edge.